Y'all may be seated. Morning, saints. Morning, sinners. I like how Pastor Jackie described the day today. It's a squishy day. The ground is very squishy under our feet. The rain has ruined a lot of plans this weekend for a lot of communities. It ruined our plans for our golf tournament. A lot of y'all had signed up to go play golf this morning to support the youth, and that course is underwater out in Capel. And so they've moved the golf course, or the golf tournament. That would be a fun thing, to move the golf course to somewhere drier. No, they've moved the golf tournament to a weekend that we hope will be drier next weekend. So look for your email, connect with Gary Michigan if you signed up to play golf. That'll happen next weekend. Let me ask you a question as we begin the sermon this morning. Just a simple question I think many of you learned probably in your own Sunday school time or confirmation hours. But who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible? All right, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible? You think about your answer. I heard it from several of you. Your answer is Moses. Right? Now, Moses. It's often what we're told who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. He's one of the biggest figures in Israel's faith history. He's mentioned more than any other throughout those 5 books. It's very natural to assume that he is the main author behind these opening stories of our faith history. Now, for about a dozen years, I went through life believing it was Moses who wrote all those words in the first 5 books, what we call the Torah or the Pentateuch. Pentateuch means 5, the Pentateuch. It wasn't until I went to seminary that I discovered I was wrong. And for many of you who know me, you know I don't like to be wrong very often. This discovery in seminary was a very hard blow to my self-esteem. In seminary, eager students take a lot of Bible classes, and we all start out at the same level in Hebrew Bible 101. This broad overview class helps orient you to this major work that is a source of wisdom, guidance, and help in your ministry. And after reading through the syllabus together, we turned to the first chapter in our main textbook about the Bible. And clearly written in the first chapter was this hard paragraph to accept. It reads like this: many scholars believe that the Torah is a composite document with the present text incorporating several older sources, both oral and written. The most widely accepted theory is that the Pentateuch is a patchwork stitched together from 4 discrete documents ascribed to anonymous writers whom scholars designated J, E, D, and P. Vanna, I'd like to solve the puzzle, right? In other words, Moses didn't write the first 5 books as I had been taught and I believed for many years, but instead it was 4 other groups who put it together. We went on to learn that when you read the original language very closely, you discover 4 different writing styles, 4 different approaches to telling the origin stories behind Israel's faith. And these 4 different sources did their work over a few hundred years to bring it all together. The writer J uses the word Yahweh most often when he talks about God. The writer E prefers the word Elohim when he addresses God. The D writer is responsible for the book of Deuteronomy, and the P writer compiled and edited all of the above with a big contribution toward the priestly book of Leviticus. I remember going back to my dorm room that afternoon and questioning everything that I knew about the Bible. If I had been told all these years that one person was responsible for the beginning of the Bible and now was being told by very well-educated and somewhat trustworthy professors that it was actually 4 different groups, what else did I not know about this book that I was dedicating my life to? And instead of being really excited to discover more about our holy faith documents and the mysteries they contained, I remember having a mini panic attack. I panicked because in that moment I faced this big question. If what I believe about the Bible isn't true anymore, is the Bible true at all? Have you ever had a moment like that in your life where something you believed was one way and then it turned out to be totally different? And when you found out this new information, it threw everything else that you knew into a state of chaos. TCU fans are feeling that today, and they thought they could always beat Texas. But now you've discovered something else, right? The question is, if what I used to know isn't true anymore, then what can be trusted? We're working through a sermon series this month called Hitting the Books, and I think an important question to address as we appreciate our Holy Scriptures is this question: is the Bible true? Is it true? In our wider culture, there are many who like to point out that a good amount of the facts of the Bible don't make sense. They don't add up, or they're just plain wrong. And I know I have a lot of conversations with our college students who go off to higher education, and they find people and professors who challenge their beliefs about the Bible. What is happening is that they're encountering a scholarly approach to understand our Holy Scriptures instead of a predominantly devotional way that we employ in our everyday lives. That's what I encountered at seminary. And in the scholarly approach, you find that a lot of the facts of the Bible don't make sense. And many people jump ahead to the conclusion that if the facts of the Bible don't add up, then it must not be true. Is it possible for a big fish to swallow a human, keep him in its belly for a few days, and then throw him up on a shore so that guy can go and do the Lord's work, as we hear what happened to the prophet Jonah? Is it possible that a prayer from a mighty warrior can stop the sun from going across the sky so that the mighty warrior's army can have more daylight to defeat their enemy on the field of battle, as happened for Joshua? Is it possible for a person to write his own death scene, as Moses does at the end of Deuteronomy? When talking about the truth, it's important to keep note of two big categories that we use to help us identify if something is true or not. On the one hand, we have facts. These are verifiable points of evidence that point us toward what is right and correct in life. Science and reason are our two best companions on this journey of truth. They are largely concerned with answering the questions of how and what. What made this apple fall from the tree? How does our Earth sustain life in such a unique way that thousands of other planets have not been able to do? When we apply these questions and process of fact-finding to our Holy Scriptures, we come away with some puzzles, and the picture isn't so black and white. It's not very clear-cut for us. We understand that it is nearly impossible to survive in the gastrointestinal system of a fish underwater for 3 days. We know that if the Earth's rotation stopped long enough to add an extra hour of daylight into our day, then life would pretty much cease to be. Archaeologists and historians have discovered enough evidence that shed light that other parts of the stories of our faith may not have happened as they have been recorded from us. Some stories don't sound so truthful when we weigh the facts. And facts are very important in certain aspects of our lives. For those of us living on blood pressure medications, we want to know that the scientists who created these life-saving drugs used the right math and formulas to concoct the exact mix of chemicals that we need. For the big roads and the bridges that we drive on, we want to know that the surveyors and the architects and the concrete mixers follow the right process so that we don't drive our car into a pit, or they collapse under too much weight, or get knocked over when the wind is too strong. Facts matter. They matter in our lives, and they matter when we are searching for the truth. However, some things can't be proved true by facts alone. Understanding the concepts of freedom, or hope, or faith, or love don't measure up when you're using the fact-finding process of truth alone. How do you prove that freedom is really the best way for societies to function on Earth? How do you prove that someone is living with hope and not just ignoring the reality around them? How do you prove that someone is actually in love with you and not just out of their mind? Right? Love will make you do some weird things. And from the outside looking in, you think this person's got to be out of their mind. But we have a word for that. We say it's love. How do you prove that? There are some things in life that we know to be true, whether we have the facts to prove it or not. And we call these things values, and they are the other side of understanding what is true. Facts, while important in life, can't give us the full picture of everything that makes up our lives. And the Bible does a really poor job of answering the scientific questions of how or what. But it wasn't created to answer those questions. It's concerned with who and why. And these questions are questions that the value side of truth asks. Up until about 400 years ago, our world wasn't necessarily concerned with facts as the only indicator of whether something was true or not. But the arrival of the Enlightenment in our Western world changed the focus from values to facts, and we've been trying to make sense of it all ever since. In the middle of this conversation about truth, we have our reading from John today with Jesus bound before Pontius Pilate. He's been unfairly arrested and tried in the Jewish courts, and now he's been handed over to the Roman authorities for his ultimate sentencing. And Pilate is trying to make sense of this whole situation. He argues with Jesus about the claims of him being king of the Jews. Pilate wants to get to the truth of the matter. And Jesus doesn't offer any satisfactory answers to him. He gives Pilate no facts. He doesn't point to a royal lineage. He doesn't offer up a specific coronation ceremony. He doesn't prove that he's been elected, appointed, or anointed to this specific title that Pilate offers. Jesus says that he's come for one thing and one thing only, to testify to the truth. And as exasperated as ever, Pilate asks, what is truth? What is truth? Earlier in the book of John, Jesus answered this question by saying that he is the truth and the way and the life. And we heard this in worship last weekend as Pastor Kate helped us to understand some things that the Bible doesn't say, like God helps those who help themselves, or God won't give you more than you can handle in your life. Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life. And over the course of my seminary studies and my career of ministry, I've come to understand how the Bible is true. It's true not because it gets the facts right, but because it gets life right. It's true not because it gets the facts right, but it gets life right. It tells me the truth of how life is, that our world is broken and in need of repair, that humans can try as hard as we might, but we can't put it together on our own. There is this thing called sin that keeps interfering in making the world as the way God wants it to be. To fix all of this, God sends the gift of the law, found in those books of Moses, the prophets who constantly point us toward God's law, and finally, Jesus, who is God found in the flesh. And Jesus came to point us toward the God who is constantly mending what we have broken, constantly calling us into a future of love, constantly filling us up with his wisdom and joy. And to accept all of this, we move beyond what we know to what we don't know. And we have a word for that. We call it faith. Faith for us Lutherans, at the end of the day, is a matter of trust. And the big question at play for each of us is not really whether the Bible is true, but whether the God who inspired all these words and these events and these stories, whether God is trustworthy. And when Jesus stands before Pilate, there is this big drama of trust being played out. Do you trust in the powers of this world as they are enfleshed in governmental systems and authorities? Do you trust in the power of yourself to make it all right? Or do you trust in the God who set it all in motion and is intimately involved in its hopeful and positive outcome? What do you trust? Or better said, whom do you trust? Jesus lived, died, and is resurrected so that you can trust the God of love and life and creation. What is truth? Truth is God taking your sin and your pain and your brokenness and fixing it all so that you can live wholly free in the power of God's Spirit. And this God, this trustworthy God, shows up in the spaces between those words on our holy pages. This is what the Apostle Paul meant when he wrote to his young apprentice Timothy. The story of God caught in our scriptures is God-breathed. It is inspired. And our God is seen acting behind and in front of these holy scenes, not just so that you can believe good things about God, but that you can trust God with your work, your life, and your future. But our trustworthy God isn't confined just to these holy pages. Our trustworthy God is found in conversations that happen when people come to share compassion and comfort and love with one another. Our trustworthy God is found when people come together to share their time and their treasure to help those in need. Our trustworthy God is found when people respond to life by thinking on things that are above and not things that are below. My prayer for you is found in the ancient words of the psalm that we read just earlier, words that are 2,500 years old. May you come to understand that the words of God are faithful and trust, and that all of God's precepts are trustworthy. Amen.